Hey, everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, president of Career Club, and welcome to another episode of Career Club Live. We've been doing this for 3 years now. I can't believe I just said that. And it just gets funner and funner as we keep doing this. And today's guest is no exception. So today I am very pleased to be joined by a friend, a colleague, Emily Dickens. Emily is the Chief of Staff, I'm going to read this, and Head of Government Affairs and Corporate Secretary for the Society of Human Resources Management, better known as SHRM. Emily, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Happy to be here.
It's so good to see you. Where do we find you today?
I am in the nation's capital in the SHRM DC office. We're in a building called the Hall of States, and we are just a stone's throw from Union Station.
Awesome. Well, I am so happy to have you here. As we were preparing for this, I was just like, when can we start pressing record? Because I'm ready to get going on this one. But as is our want to do, I just wanted, we're obviously going to get into your history a bit more, so we don't need to do it all right now. But I like to ask just a couple icebreaker questions, help people get to know you a little bit. Okay. So where was Emily Dickens born and raised?
In Queens, New York, Mary Immaculate Hospital.
Is that where you grew up? Did you grow up in Queens?
I did. I grew up in an area called St. Albans. And if anyone is on here that is a hip hop fan, you would hear LL Cool J talk about the rock. It's the red, blue, and green rock that sits in the middle of this community. I grew up just mere blocks from there.
Awesome. Very cool. New York girl. Come on. So tell me just a little bit about where you went to school.
I'm a public school kid, so I was fortunate to be able to walk to school for elementary school and then grew up in the rest of the New York City public school system. And then decided that I wanted to experience HBCU life. You grew up in New York City. My high school was so diverse that I just wanted to get this experience I'd seen on TV. And so I applied to a number of schools, but applied to two HBCUs, NCCU and Spelman. I got waitlisted for Spelman and got into NCCU. And by the time Spelman came back around, my dad said, "There's no way you're going all the way to Atlanta." He said, "I couldn't get to you in a day if something happened and there was an emergency," because my dad wasn't flying back then. So he said yes to NCCU because his relatives, his family's from a little town called Lewisburg, North Carolina, which is about 45 minutes from Durham, where Central is. And so I said yes to Central, and I haven't regretted it a day.
Good for you. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And then just a little bit about your family. I know you're married.
I am. I'm married to my college sweetheart. So I met him my sophomore year, and we have been together ever since. He is amazing. He is an assistant principal. He's an administrator. They call them administrators now. So he's an administrator at a K-8 school in Northeast DC. And I'm so proud of him. He has worked at every type of institution of education. So he's done charter schools, he's done international baccalaureate school, he's done elementary, he's done middle, he's done high school. He's done it all, and I think he's one of the smartest people in the world.
He would have to be to keep up with you.
Oh.
Now, do you mind just very briefly, because again, I know we're going to get into this in more detail, just paint a little bit of a picture of your career coming out of school?
So it's funny that I'm in this building today. I just thought about this, Bob. I remember I came out of school and I spent a year at AmeriCorps Vista. I don't know if I told you this, coming out of undergrad. And it was great experience. And did not get accepted to law school initially on my first pass.
Oh, wow.
Which was okay. And so I spent that year getting a master's degree. And my advisor in undergrad said to me, "Look, it's a different group of people you're competing against. And so you got to have something different." So add my year of AmeriCorps Vista, completing a master's degree. I then applied to law school, but I applied to a harder version. I applied to the evening program at my alma mater, which has fewer seats. It was the only evening program in the state at that time, and much harder to get into. And I got in there. And was my evening class had about 26 people. I tell people all the time, I was the youngest at that time of my classmates. Remember, this is on a campus of an HBCU, and this is the importance of those schools. I just graduated up the hill where the majority of the students look like me. My first night there, I look around, there are 6 people that look like me. And the rest have these lives. They're doctors. They're already doing stuff there. They're professionals. They're MBAs. They have that. And they just decided at a certain point in their life, they wanted to go back and fulfill the dream of getting a law degree and committed to doing this thing for 4 years at night. And
Wow.
so I loved being around them. It was really great. So I thought I wanted to be in sports and entertainment law, and because I love sports, I'm a big sports girl. And but that didn't happen. I got a job thanks to a professor who led me to a job working for the mayor of Chapel Hill. So I was a mayoral aide in the town of Chapel Hill, and that's how I started government affairs and ended down that track. And ultimately ended up working for an institution of higher education, running their government affairs, then to a system office. So now helping with government affairs for 17 campuses as opposed to one, and then ultimately led my own policy shop working for the Association of Governing Boards of Colleges and Universities. Left there to go be general counsel at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and then was asked to take on policy as one of another hat while I was there. Thought I was getting away from policy, but didn't. And then ended up at SHRM about almost 7 years ago. Well, now 7 years ago, ended up at SHRM as chief of staff. And I thought that would be the only thing I do here. I can focus. It's a much bigger organization.
Mhm.
Being chief of staff here will be a big enough job. Oh no. So I do a stint as our interim CHRO for about 10 months. Then government affairs gets added to my portfolio. And then over the years, I've had different pieces of the business. So I've also been responsible for our real estate and our buildings and leases and things of that nature. And then now I have responsibility for our SHRM Foundation, which is the 501c3, our corporate governance. That's why the corporate secretary hat that I have on, and legal reports to me as well. So I've got an interesting portfolio.
Wow. Well, it seems like responsibility follows you. So you must keep
I
doing a
don't
great
know.
job.
I don't know, but I'll say this: the full circle moment today by talking to you about my career in this space is I remember working full in North Carolina, working on the campus and visiting the Hall of States. And the Hall of States here, this is the building where most states have their federal offices. So
Mm.
most of the 50 states have an office in this building where our office is. And I remember coming to this building and saying, one day I want to work here. So 6 years ago, when Johnny and I came to look at the space and we signed the lease, and I'm standing in the lobby, and I just have this moment where I remember being this, government affairs professional visiting DC on a regular basis and thinking I would love to work in this building. And now I lead a team, and this is our office, it's our DC office. So it's just such a full circle moment for me.
And there's another little girl from Jamaica, Queens running through there. I wonder one day if I could work in a pretty office building like this. Um, and then lastly, well, you mentioned sports, but what do we find Emily doing when she's not at work? What do you like to do?
Um, you'll find me on the couch with Wallace, my husband. He's going to be on one end reading a book, and I'm going to be on the other end reading a book. And it's usually going to be something, a romance novel, a mafia boss novel, something that is not like serious, because I have to be so serious and deal with the worries of the world every day that it's a nice escape. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just that person. Or I love music. Or you're going to find me listening to sports or at a sporting event. My dad had 3 girls, and we read the back of the New York Daily News every day from back to front. And so back is sport page. So we knew Mike Lupica before, we knew other people. And so sports just became something we have an interest in, and I've always followed and continue to follow.
Who are your favorite teams?
So New York Mets in baseball. Of course, the Knicks are in basketball. And I go back and forth a lot. I'm a Giants fan. I have to be a Giants fan. But I tell you right now, I was in a room this weekend with a whole bunch of women who were over 60, and they all know who Jalen Hurts is. And not
Wow.
they were in there quoting Jalen Hurts. So we were all in there laughing about the main thing is the main thing, and all the other quotes there. So, you got to love Philly. I was a big Donovan McNabb fan when he was,
Yes.
I'm an Andy Reid fan. So there's something about Philly where you get really good talent. Even, Michael Vick was there for a little bit too as
You
well.
didn't even say Randall Cunningham yet.
Oh, well, yeah, that's right. That goes back a little bit. But yeah, so when you think about it, it just something about that team resonates, and they've been able to get talent that other people outside of Philadelphia really like.
So let's use that as a pivot point.
Okay.
So there's a couple things that we're going to cover in this episode. One is just a little bit more about your story, and then two is we'll spend a few minutes looking at some of the policy initiatives that SHRM is working on that you're leading right now. But so what I heard, Emily, was you were born in a very privileged, silver spoon in your mouth kind of a background, right?
Absolutely not. I was privileged to have both of my parents in our home. My parents were married 50 years and literally made 50 years in April of 2017. And my dad passed away that August. So, um, and I will tell you, my dad had a seventh grade education, and my mother, brilliant woman, had a high school education. And I always used to think, my gosh, my mom in college would be amazing because she was to me, she was our love of reading. And I guess both parents encouraged it, but we could sit for hours with our paperbacks and read our books. And I'm a little old fashioned. I've got a Kindle, but it's something about having that book in your hand. Mm-hmm. And so education was so important. So no, not privileged. We grew up in what we would now, I guess, say lower middle class, a great neighborhood with lots of lots of young men who looked up to my dad, who he mentored in different ways. And in a church environment too. I'm Lutheran, by the way. And we think about a Lutheran church in the middle of a predominantly African American community. So our membership was mostly African American, Caribbean American, especially. And so a lot of the things we did was surrounded by our activities were all things that we did with the church. Girl Scouts was through the church, all of these things. But rich by no means. As a matter of fact, I tell the story of when my mom dropped me off at college. And we took Greyhound from New York City to Durham, North Carolina, with borrowed luggage from my godmother that I still have one or two pieces of that I keep as a reminder. And I remember getting there, and my mother said, you have one job, just to focus on graduating, because a lot of people had contributed to this journey for me. But my mother was returning home to help my dad finish packing because we were being evicted.
What?
Yeah. So housing insecurity became a thing for me because my parents had rented, they were renters for a very long time. And the house to us, we thought it was a castle. Now, I will tell you, now when I drive by the house, it looks so much smaller, right? But for a kid, we thought we lived in this big corner house with a big yard. And it was, and we had a good life for us. But what we also knew is that money was tight from time to time. We knew when payday was, and we knew when there was a payday and there was a little extra money and we could go to McDonald's on that Friday payday. And so to this day, my favorite places that make me happy, McDonald's, White Castle, a good slice of New York pizza, and Nathan's hot dogs, because
there's so many things to love about you, Emily. You just keep
But that's because when my parents had a little extra something and we could go out and celebrate, we went to those places. And so there are always these good memories. But we were not rich. There was no silver spoon. And so I remember, because they had been in that house for so long, the landlord sold the house without giving them the option to even buy it. And so they'd been out of the market for so long, they had to go back into a market where rent was 2 to 3 times what they had been paying. So they get into a house where they're pretty much over, paying more than they typically were. And it just was a difficult period for us there. And it was a beautiful house, right? I remember thinking we hosted a NAACP Youth Council meeting there. It was right down the street from our church. It was really good. But then the bills added up, and my parents were finding themselves at a point where they were going to be evicted. And so I was worried about that. Now, family came to the rescue, and they ultimately ended up living with my uncle for a little while, and then they ended up getting an apartment right next door to my uncle, which is great, my mom's twin brother. And ultimately, when he became ill some years later, it was great because my mother was able to provide some support and oversee his care because he was right next door.
So I appreciate you sharing what you just did
Mhm.
because, again, you did not come from a lot. You came from more than enough, right? Because it's not all about financial resources. And
Right.
you had a very, very strong family unit around you, which I think for kids, that's really the most important thing, right?
Yes.
Was was education, I mean, going to law school, was that something that, your parents would have expected from you girls?
Yeah. I mean, all of us were in, it's funny in New York City, people try to say tracking is terrible, right? You remember tracking in education, and I
Mhm.
understand there are reasons for that. We were absolutely tracked, and we were in above average classes and courses. And so all three of us did really well in school. And there was an expectation, especially me being the oldest, I wanted to be a lawyer as a kid. My cousin, it was like a thing when my older cousins, we go out to Long Island and visit them, and they would introduce us to their friends and say, "This is my cousin, and she's really smart. And Emily, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I think I used to say something like a lawyer, psychologist. I had created something, right? But I knew what in our community that there are certain professions that are good professions: lawyer, doctor, teacher, right? There are these professions. And you knew if you had done that, that you would make your parents proud. And for me, I thought they've given me so much, I can make them so proud. And I couldn't tell you, it was not till like law school where I started thinking about being a sports lawyer, but I knew that I would do something in the law. And ultimately, I knew I didn't want to be in the courtroom every day. I knew that was the case.
I mean, doing night school, that sounds super hard by itself, but as you think about, some of the hardest challenges, because part of what I do want to get at for myself and for folks listening, Emily,
Mhm.
is, every great story has lots of challenges. The
Woo.
hero, right, often is faced with, how am I going to figure this one out? This is the end. Like I thought I was going to do this. What were some of the really hard moments for you that you found a way to push through?
So I'll tell you, Bob, it's only recently that I've even focused on those. So, my description, on Facebook, they give you this thing, what's your tagline?
Yeah.
Is no time for drama, so I keep it moving.
No time for drama, so I keep it moving.
And I have just kept it moving. And it's now where I'm forced a little bit now to be more reflective because people think I have a story to tell. And I think I'm no different than anyone else. We all got a story, right? Um, but recently, my husband and I were walking through the airport at RDU, and I just stopped and I was like, Wallace, do you remember when I was being sent off for my training for AmeriCorps Vista? I did not have, at that time, I didn't, I wasn't smart enough to say, get me a ticket from New York to Alabama where my training was, right? They did it from North Carolina because they knew had just graduated from undergrad there. So I had to take a bus from New York City because I'd gone home right after college to spend at least a few weeks with parents. So I take the Greyhound back to North Carolina. I get there, take a cab from the bus station to the airport. And at that time, there's one hotel on the grounds at the airport. It's no longer there. So it dates you a little bit, right? But there's one hotel there. I go there and I didn't have enough money for one night at that hotel.
Oof.
My flight's not leaving until it's leaving early the next morning, but I had a gap of time. So I go back into the airport and I slept in the airport that night. And what I remember is how cold it was because by now it's June or so. So it's late May, early June where I'm going for, right. So it's going to be cold because they got air on. I wouldn't have thought to have a blanket or anything. I just have whatever it was I was going to travel in. And so walking, and literally we're walking on our way to the Admirals Club. So to think about how you go from not having a place to relax because you have an extended break in an airport to now
Mhm.
being able to go to the Admirals Club, just that moment was like, oh my gosh. But I don't think about those moments a lot. I shared the rejection like for the first time. You think about, oh, I've done everything I wanted to do, and then not getting into law school that first time. I was like, I could have been really, really devastating. And I just sought counsel. I went to, the gentleman who had been my advisor, Dr. Percy Murray, had been my advisor in the history department at Central. And I said, I can't believe I didn't get in. And he was just like, I'm telling you what you need to do for the next time. And your GPA was high enough where you don't have to take the GRE. And so my first year of law school, let me tell you my first year of law school, what Emily did. I'm working full time. I'm writing my thesis, because I remember I'd done year 1 of the graduate program. Year 2 is writing your thesis. So I'm writing my thesis, and I'm planning a wedding. I got married April.
Oh my goodness.
This year. Right. And I'm not just planning. Remember, I'm a personality, and I got one of those husbands that does care about stuff. He cares about furniture. He cares about how things look. So I can't just do what I want. I got to negotiate everything with him. So I'm planning this wedding for April, knowing we can't go on a honeymoon until probably December, because April is around the time where we're going to have exams. Right. So I'm doing all of this, and I'm just making it happen. It's, but because think about it, I wanted to be in law school, so I got in. So I got to do my work. I wanted to, this graduate program, I want to finish. And then I'm not going to, delay my wedding. He asked me to marry him the February before. We didn't know that I would be in school. You just don't know. So I just did it all that first year. Do I have like an exemplary GPA out of law school? No. Did I get out of law school and pass the bar the first time? Yes. And the goal was to pass the bar, right? Ultimately, law school is great, but the goal is to get in, get out, and pass the bar. And I did that. So check. So those are 2 examples of just, where there were the things that could have been barriers to me doing what I needed to do. I just keep it moving. And even now, I think about my dad passing away in 2017, and it was really just a major loss for us. And he'd been, going downhill, but literally between May 4th and that time, it just that quick. And there were so many things we were working on at work, and we took the time to grieve, but it wasn't like I was taking a whole month off. Right? It was, I'm in planning mode, and so you even think about, and I know people do things differently. I tell the story, I think I shared with you, our family, we're suicide survivors. My youngest sister took her life, and I got the call at work.
Oh my goodness.
And so at that moment, knowing who I am and why I probably was the person who she in the letter told them to call if something, understanding my role in the family as oldest child. And the most important thing was figuring out how to get someone to tell my mother and my father together. So I didn't have a moment then to just fall apart. I had to start figuring out what is the plan, because I got to get my parents informed. I've got to get my sister informed. I've got to figure out how what are we doing with remain. There are all these pieces of the pie. And so for me, it was once I took care of all those pieces, and then probably 48 hours later, was on the couch decompressing, where I finally kind of had this first moment of the tears, right? And my husband was ready by then. He was like, okay, So, but I literally had a work trip planned. My sister had explicit instructions, no services. So there's nothing else to be done. And I kept it moving. But that's my choice. But I know bad things happen to good people every day.
Yes.
We just have to choose. It's about our choices. What's the next step? And how do you choose to move through that? Do I have days where I miss the 2 of them greatly, my dad and my sister? I absolutely. But do I find joy in imagining the 2 of them together? Boy, do I have some joy up in there, because I know I could just think when my dad arrived, they're like, girl, what were you thinking? Like, there's these conversations in my head. But, we all deal with things differently. But I know that there are millions of other people who have dealt with the same things. Every day I have friends. You get to be a certain age, you got friends. People are losing their parents every day. We're caregivers for my mom. I can't say that my journey is the same as others, but I know it's similar. And who am I to be, woe is me, when I've got a job, I've got a roof over my head, my mom has a roof over her head, we woke up this morning. So I find joy in that basic. I think when people say to me, how's, good morning, how you doing this morning? I'll say, we woke up this morning. Right. And I'm good for naps in the middle of the day when I get a little stressed. So I'm like, I woke up twice today, right? Like it is the basic thing for me, because I know I'm so blessed and there are so many others who could have it worse. And so we don't have time to kind of stick ourselves in the mud and stay there. We got to just keep it moving.
And Emily, that's, we're going to get on to professional stuff in a minute, but those are very real, very personal things. And, it's not a far leap, though, for people to kind of fall into victimhood. And if you knew how bad I had it, you would lower your expectations of me, because I have. And right. And it's like, don't expect anything from me. And I think your parents instilled something in you. I think your creator probably instilled something in you that is just a fire that doesn't want to be put out. And irrespective of what's going on around you, that's one of the things I really admire. You are a doer. Like, you just get stuff done. And the world needs more doers, I think. Go ahead.
I would say this. I think we underestimate our strength. You never know how you're going to get through something until you have to get through it. Right. And I truly believe that we've got to exercise that muscle that we all have to kind of get through life, because the other things we're exposed to so much more than what people were exposed to before. So you control what touches you. I've been telling people, imagine yourself in a box. You control what goes in that box, and everything else can bounce off of that box, and you really control it. Social media, I control my social media intake. I think I told you we're in Lent now, Bob. So
yes,
during 2020, COVID hits us during Lent. So I had that year given up social media. So for the first part of when we're all at home because of COVID, I don't know what's going on social media, because I had already given it up for Lent. And I really think that helped me get through it. You think about it, I had friends and family in New York City, and we saw all the gruesome on the news. You saw these gruesome things. But I think it was controlled for me because I had given it up and I didn't get all of the extra stuff that comes with that. And I just say to people, I know that term victim just has so many connotations around it. And I just say to people this, we really have more control over our experiences than we think. And we should exert that control more.
So I want to build on a couple thoughts real quick. One is exercise that muscle, was the words or the phrase that you use. And when I'm coaching clients, and we'll talk about resilience, and a lot of times people think of resilience as like a squishy ball. And it's under a lot of pressure and it's all kind of squished up, and then you let it go and it kind of returns to its shape. And people would use that as a picture of resilience. I'm like, no, that's recovery. Like that's at best, that's getting back to its former state, right? But then I think the real word picture is with how muscles actually grow, right? And I hope I don't mispronounce this, but the process is hypertrophy. It has to be torn to get stronger, right? Like when we lift weights, that muscle, people know this, the muscle is actually being torn a little bit, and then it recovers, and then you tear it some more and it recovers, and you tear it some more and it recovers. And it actually gets bigger and stronger, right? And then you build up, that strength, one, to deal with more. Well, I've been through that. I could get through this. Or you build memories. Like, I know I can do this because I've done something at least this hard before. It also makes you less fragile, less inclined to be a victim, because that didn't hurt. Like, hit me harder. Like, that still didn't hurt. Like, versus somebody who can just wilt. Like, oh gosh, that was horrible, and I can't get back up. What are you thinking?
I agree. I think simultaneously as we're building this muscle, here's one thing I've learned over the last 5 years. You've also got to build the empathy muscle. Because there are some people that whatever their foundation was, never got that starting point to build that muscle that helps them remain strong and resilient. And so we've got to have some empathy for those. And within that empathy, remember that's different from sympathy, show them the way a little bit. Hopefully, lead
Yes.
by example as someone. And it's often when we see someone and something bad has happened to them, you're like, Lord, how could they be smiling, right? We used to say, you think about, but then you see the grace and the grit that they have, and you think, wow, that's something I want to have. How can I do that? So I think it's important for those of us who have identified that muscle, that strength muscle in us, to share how we've done so. I think probably that's why I'm more comfortable now talking about my story a little bit to people if they can find something. I had a mentor, former national president of my sorority, was sitting next to me, and I was about to give a speech, and I said, I always worry, that no one's going to like what I say. And she said, if you inspire just one person, you've done your job.
100%.
Yeah. And so that's your actions and how you respond to a situation inspires one person to think differently about that strength muscle or that empathy muscle. I think we can do a lot better for each other.
And I appreciate what you're saying here too, Emily, in that, to be non-judgmental, right? Just because you've gotten over a bridge that somebody else hasn't crossed just yet,
Yeah.
to do that in a non-judgmental way. It also makes me think a little bit, I don't want to say the word but, and
Mhm.
the difference between nice and kind.
Mm.
They're not synonyms. Nice is being pleasant,
Yeah.
right? No, okay, okay. I think, and this is, I do know you well enough to know in your personality, you are okay with confronting the truth and the facts about something. So, it's such a unique blend of being exhibiting grace and but also loving the person enough to challenge them to be a better version of themselves.
Yeah. And let me say, you don't get there overnight, right? So, um, 18, 19-year-old Emily, who's pledging a sorority for the first time, probably is somebody who still hates me that was pledging under me then, right? Um, and I get it, right? Because you evolve into understanding that you don't know everyone's story. And once you realize that, you don't know why that person is that way. Now, you don't have to accept having that person in your life is what, because what they got on is so toxic that it would mess up what you got going on. But accept that they got a story. For whatever reason, they are here where they find themselves. And if there's a way for you to help them and to help them strengthen any muscles that can help them elevate themselves and elevate their experience, that's great. But also knowing when you can acknowledge that they got a story. You're sorry that that is their story, but there's no room for them or their story in your space too. And you got, so you got to have both ends, because it's important who you have around you also helps to strengthen that muscle. I want to be around people. I know I need to be around people who show empathy more, because it was something I needed to strengthen. I'm a New Yorker, right? So I'm like, oh, but I also, as a manager and a leader in the workplace, there's an expectation that I show empathy. And so knowing that that was a gap for me, I needed to make sure I expanded my circle to be around more people who I think did it well. Our CEO at SHRM does it extremely well. And I can tell you, when I first went to work with him as his general counsel, I'd known him for years. And we are friends. We say to each other, we are friends and we work together. So I'll say that. I remember thinking, gosh, he talks to these people all the time. Everybody has access to him. This is crazy. Like, this is just team too much for me, because I want to come in, get my job done, focus on what we need to do, and keep it moving. And his thing is, you have to take the time to listen to people's stories. They're telling you their story sometimes without even telling you their story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's enough for you to know how you communicate with them. It helps you learn how to communicate with them, to understand what's important to them. So as a manager, I may have people who, never had a massage or something before. There's something they might tell me that I know they've never had. And when I want to gift them something, I can change their experience and what they think of their workplace by gifting them something that they've never had that I know they want. Or it could be something that a person that they talk about their parents a lot. I happen to talk about mine a lot too. So that's important. And so that's something the two of you can bond on. And so I just think it's important to think about who you have around you, where they can help you fill the gaps. I love having people who I think have been through some real stuff and who have jobs that are much harder than mine, because if I can see them deal with things that are harder than what I have to deal with, that when I get to the point that I have to deal with something that hard, I've got a good example.
I think, gosh, you make me think about a bunch of stuff, Emily. One of them is, I feel like a little bit of what you were describing a minute ago, talking about Johnny and his, being a high empath,
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit of the difference between a manager and a leader. A
Mm.
manager, like, I think some of your natural tendency is to be a manager. That's to keep stuff moving. Let's
Yeah,
just keep it moving, right? And that sees the worker and the work.
yeah,
And I think, where you've kind of come to be is, becoming the leader that you are because you see the human being, not just the worker, right? And the person that does want to talk about her parents, or the person who does have a story to tell and they need to share it.
yes.
I just interviewed recently a lady that wrote a book called Emotionally Charged, and it's about what she calls the emotional labor of being a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's really, really good. And, a big piece of this is what you're talking about, which is being empathetic and taking the time. And it's interesting because she argues that emotions are a data point. They're giving you information
Yeah,
through their emotions, right? And when you just sort of like, hey, stop being that way. Could you quit emoting for a minute? It's like, well, okay, maybe in degrees, but they're giving you some really serious insight and data into who they are. And as
yeah,
a leader, I need to know that because every one of us is a unique work of art and we
that's right.
don't all respond to the exact same things. And, watching how you've blossomed as a leader and continue to, it's just very interesting that Johnny's modeled stuff for you.
Mhm. Oh yeah. It is. Um, I didn't see it. You start to see it in yourself because again, I keep it moving. And so even now, taking more moments to realize, wow, I think I handled that really well, and acknowledging I would not have handled that the same way 5 years ago. But I think it's also to this leadership expands to how you onboard people and hire people too. And I know we talk about workplace as a people manager. You got to know where you can inspire people to do good work and if you can inspire people. There are people out there that won't care anything about my story. It doesn't resonate with them, and I would be of no interest to them. And so that may not be a person that needs to be on my team when we've got a lot of work to do. And so when
Yeah.
you're thinking about that hiring process, the questions you ask when you're asking about what's important to them and what are the things you could find in common, that's so important as well. What do they need? Are they entering this job thinking that this is a time for them to learn more, or do they think they know everything and that it was underutilized in their last location and this is where they can really just shine, like they're ready? There are just all these pieces now you can pick up while talking to your people, but you got to spend time talking to your people, which is why Johnny used to say to us, you spend 75% doing people management. And it
Mhm.
would make me so sad because I would say, well, gosh, all this work to do. And if you are an extreme empath, you take on. So I always think about you're taking on the weight of other people's things. So that's the other piece is you got to also have boundaries
Mhm.
and tell people. So in the workplace, I'll say people work for me. I can have a whole discussion. I can know your story because I'm very interested in people's stories. I was a history major. I love hearing people's stories and things like that. But what I also encourage them to do is solve their own issues. So I tell you, I think I maybe shared with this. I had an employee one time who I absolutely admire, single mother, two preteens. COVID is happening. We're coming back in the office. She comes in, she says, look, Emily, the girls got to go to school half a day on X day and X day. What I'd like to do is on these days come in at this time, and then I can come in early on these. She came to me with the solution. She didn't walk in
Yes.
the door and said, Emily, the girls got to go back to school. I don't know what I'm going to do. What can I do? And so I think for the employer and the employee, each has a part to play in that relationship. And if you're
Mhm.
clear about what your boundaries, like my people know is I don't want you to come to me with a problem. I want you to have thought about it, have a solution. I may change the solution by then. I tell my team when they're coming up with a strategy, so you better check in with me between 75 to 80% time done on the strategy because I'll change the whole thing because I have an opinion. So, but I want them to weigh in. I want them to spend more than 50% of the energy weighing in, but I also want them to acknowledge that there could be another way to see it. But that give and take, I want them to feel empowered to make the moves they need to move to get things rolling. And then also understand that even all of that effort could be for naught, maybe because I might have some other information that informs how we move. So, but as you're hiring, think about how you hire people. I want people who can get off the starting in like in track and field, right? I want them to go ahead and pass maybe the first two batons before they get to me. That's what I'm thinking about.
So you anticipated a question of mine, which was in team building, the importance in organization building, the importance of cultural alignment.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk about that for a minute?
It's important. I've learned this more and more. You know, we always talk about the concept of managing up and being able to manage up, but it's also we have to manage down. You think you don't want to say down, but you want to manage all around you as a people manager. And so you got to say there's a big culture, big C in your organization. What's the overall culture? But then each of your divisions has a little C, what that culture is. You got to be transparent about it. A few years ago, I did an exercise with an executive, Melissa Dawn Simpkins, who you may know. She's in our circle too a little bit. She owns a company called She Suite. So Melissa, we were talking about branding, and so she said, you got to come up with what are the ways you like to be communicated with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what when you are telling an employee how you manage Emily, what are the 3 to 4 things, right? And so I wrote down those things. And so for a new employee, our first meeting is, hey, here's what you need to know dealing with me. Let's get to the point. I don't need a whole story, right? So if you need a decision maker, you got to tell people. Like I'm in New York, like I don't want to, you know, if we're just sitting down somewhere drinking iced tea or drinking hot tea, and we've got the time. But if we're thinking about in the business day when there's so many decisions I'm asked to make every day, let's get to the point.
Looking for the inside scoop on payroll? Whether you're a payroll pro or just curious about your paycheck, we've got 2 podcasts you cannot miss. It's About Payroll delivers the latest trends for payroll pros, and It's About Your Paycheck is here for employees, breaking down pay and rights in simple terms. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts, and endless insights to keep you informed and empowered. Subscribe now and elevate your payroll knowledge. Brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets people.
Right? Because then I can ask you what else I want to know, but don't assume that. Get to the point. Tell me what it is you know, right? The other piece is, you know, don't make assumptions. Just because I said yes in one direction may not mean it, you know, just never. So there are like these 2 or 3 things I say to people so that they know how to manage up with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's even when you talk about your EAs, right? You got to tell them what's the thing that's the most important to you. You know what's the most important thing if you're going to work for Emily is my money and my time. So if you're managing my budget and my calendar, that is the top 2 things. If that's your role as the EA that you are responsible for, there'll be other things. But if you don't have those 2 right by a certain period, we're not going to be able to work together. Because I'm not going to jail. I worked real hard for that law license. So I'm not going to jail because you input the wrong receipt in the wrong thing, right? And time is such a valuable resource. I want to spend time, if I got to have these meetings, doing things that I think are going to be of interest to me and the organization and provide some ROI.
Okay. We're going to get into some weird policy stuff in just a second, but before I do that, I know that you've had an executive coach who's very important and impactful in your life.
Yes.
What are maybe 1 or 2 or 3 just like real nuggets that guide you?
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I don't know if you know the story, Miss Loretta. And actually, we buried her a year ago last week. So got the call that she passed away early last year. And she had been my coach for a few years. She was amazing. And I think one of the things she talked to me about was, you know, people always want to tell you how to be aggressive. The word aggressive and women is just always this kind of negative thing. But there is a way that you can do this. And I think going to school in the South, I learned about the honey child land and how you could do it with a little honey. She allowed me to do it with a little honey, but a little lemon. And so I can, and that helped me be closer to who I was, because I'm going to tell you, it's hard when you're this person. I'm a native New Yorker. I don't care how long I've been married to a Southerner, and how long I went to school and lived in North Carolina. Like, that thing is in me. And I came to DC thinking I could go back to being that native New Yorker where if you said something, it wouldn't hurt people's feelings. People are so emotional now. It's a lot different. And evidently I'm not far enough north now to do like the way I want to. So I gotta still have the honey, but I don't have to apologize for the lemon, because there are times where I got to be more tart and I got to be more direct. And so it's that nuance of knowing when to do so. And and I think that's the important thing. She knew when to say, now, Miss Emily, now you know better, right? Like, so there were all these pieces of the pie for her. So I think that lemon, and we never said it like that, but the more I think about it, it is when I can add that lemon to my honeyness. And so I think you got to know when to do that. And then number two is, take time to enjoy some of your wins.
Yes.
Again, because I always say, no time for drama, I keep it moving. I was not spending enough time finding joy in my wins.
Mm.
And you got to sit with your wins sometimes, just to realize how grateful. And I'm one of those people that I try to exude gratitude every day in everything I do. But understanding that even the little thing is a win. We not too long ago, our CEO got to testify before the House Education and Workforce Committee, full committee testimony. And I'm so in it, right? I'm so much in making sure his testimony is amazing. I had a good friend call me, text me a screenshot of it and say, I know you penned that. This is a New Yorker, right? So he's like, I know you penned that. And it's crazy, but he knew me as a teenager. We've been friends since I was like 15 years old. So like, he knows me. And he said what happened is it came up on his thread, and he was like, if I see Johnny, I know Emily's not too far away. Isn't that crazy? Now, this is somebody, he's never met my boss. So he's like, but I know she's not too far away. So he pulls up the hearing, he's listening. And there are nuggets if you knew me in there. How amazing is that? That someone that's known me for years knew that and was so proud of me to send me that note and that screenshot and to say, like, I see you. And I sat in that for a little while. We ended up connecting with our phone and just joking about some other stuff. But I just think we don't realize how many people are out here rooting for us. And as you're winning, sit in those wins just a little bit. Don't get lazy in it. Don't get too comfortable, but enjoy the wins because you've worked hard for them.
So I want to say just a couple things, and I promise we're going to move on. Two things that you said. One was a little bit earlier in what you just said there. For me, a lot of this comes down to what you said earlier about choosing. I get to choose my attitude. You said you choose to be grateful. You choose to spend time looking at the wins. You choose to erect some barriers to deflect some negativity from you. Like, that's not welcome here, and I'm not going to let you into my space, right? Yeah. And so, you and I have shared some training around autonomy, right, and agency, and we get to choose. I wrote my job search masterclass, and it's called Making Your Own Weather. Like, I'm going to make sunshine, right? Because I can. Yeah. That is something I have control over, right? I get to choose my attitude and I get to choose my actions.
That's right.
And if I had to put it in a bow, that's what I really admire about you, Emily, is you make choices and you act on those choices and you push away the stuff that's not consistent with it. And this, not being a victim and not being, just subject to your circumstances, but actually exerting control over your circumstances and creating a future. And again, not just for you, not just for your career, but maybe this will be the segue into the SHRM piece of this, but creating a future of work, right, that looks like something that you want to be a part of and you want to be part of your legacy.
And I'm going to tell you, when you're a person that chooses like that and makes these choices, it could be a lonely space sometimes. I had a former classmate tell me that I came off as not elitist, but just not approachable, not not someone who thought they were better than everyone else because I didn't get to go to a bunch of parties and I wasn't at certain places. Now, if you know my story now, I had 4 years to graduate undergrad, right? I couldn't do the 5-year, 6-year plan. I had parents at home who were dealing with real life issues, and that was my only assignment, right? And so now knowing my story, not that I want them to feel guilty, but they made assumptions about me that I was aloof. And because my focus wasn't on some of the things that college students focus on. Now I got to do some great things. Look, I picked up a husband in college. I joined the sorority. But there are probably lots of things. I run into people. I'm chair of the board at my alma mater now. So this is so funny to me now because someone will say, "Oh, don't you know X?" And I'm like, "No." And because even then, as I was moving away, I was choosing who to engage with to keep my life less drama as drama would happen there. So I just think it's important that people understand, again, you don't know everyone's story. And these people may be making important and critical choices that they've got to make to move through their lives. And sometimes it looks one way and it's not.
All right. So speaking of making choices, one of the things that you guys say at SHRM is policy, not politics.
Indeed.
Yeah. And so we've gone, in not a very long span of time through two totally different political worldviews, right? And again, we're recording this in March of 2025. So we're not that far removed from an election, an inauguration, and a flurry of executive orders and everything else.
True.
Given all that, how is SHRM trying to influence? What are the priorities that SHRM sees that as you guys are, again, not focused on politics, although I know you get accused of that sometimes, but the policies that you guys are focused on?
Great segue. Because look, we made a choice almost 7 years ago to focus on policy, not politics. And so when you have a now 76, 77-year-old organization, and you've got members who've been members for 40 years, there are times where there's an expectation that you behave in a manner that you did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And things move too fast for that now. So 7 years ago, we said we've got to be about policy, not politics. There are tables we've not been invited to. And that because people believe we believe one thing over another. There are tables I've been invited to and chastised because of prior behavior. And people just want to get their moment in the sun to tell me what they really thought about us. Yeah, I've had that happen. So policy, not politics, is really this understanding of who you are. With 340,000 members, we will never please every member. But what we will do is look at the big issues. We've got these policy pillars. We look at these big issues that for the majority of our members, they tend to deal with some of these issues on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to leverage our power to convene. We want to be like when we call, we can call to the table an R and a D. And that happened just last week. We've been doing a series of webcasts on some of the EOs and some of the issues going on. And so we did our 50 days in to the first 100 days. And I was most proud of the comments that people said, "I'm so happy you had an R and a D." We had Sherry Bustos and Rodney Davis. Both had served as members of the Illinois delegation, a congressional delegation at one point together. Both had been out of office for maybe about 2 years, so they were newly out of office. They had a great camaraderie. They spoke well of one another. They worked well together. It was a very civil conversation, even when they had points they disagreed on. That's what we need to be doing more of. And again, remember I told you about how you want people to look at you and be inspired by how you behave. This is a great example. We want people to be inspired about getting both sides of the aisle together to talk about critical issues. And ultimately, we want to find solutions. That is not acceptable to some people, and I absolutely understand it. But I want them to understand why we do it. Right now, we know that Republicans in Congress like to call on SHRM because SHRM has really good data about what matters to people in the workplace. Democrats like to call on SHRM because they know our members can give you real life examples of how compliance and some of the laws are enacted in the workplace. They want to hear their voices. That means both sides want to hear from us, and that means we're doing our job. So what are the 3 top things that we are focusing on in the 119th Congress?
Yep.
1, the workforce participation gap. 2, the future of work. And 3, modernizing workforce policies. So if I take them one by the other, workforce participation gap, even with the layoffs we're seeing, we still have millions of jobs, at least 1 million jobs that have gone unfilled in this country. That's not good for business. It's not good for our country. But we also have people who are opting out of the workplace. There is research now on people who are failed to thrive, are 17 to 24-year-old young men who are either playing video games in their parents' basements and not working at all. They are either living in rural parts of our country where they don't have access to training and broadband. So we're talking about AI. Some people still don't even have access to the internet, right? So think about that. They're not being reskilled and upskilled. The jobs have moved away, and so they don't have the resources there. And we're also looking at people who are dealing with social anxiety and mental health issues that have gone untreated because they don't have the resources, and others who were sadly losing to premature death because of drug usage or suicide. We have and a lot of those are young men. And so there's been a lot of focus on women in the workplace for years, which is great. And we still need that focus, maybe at a different level. Maybe it's now women are in the workplace. Now, are they the bosses in that workplace? Are they the leaders? Are they getting the opportunity to break through the glass ceiling? That's probably the issue now we're dealing with them. But we have a whole group, another issue where we have men, many white men, but men, many Black men who are not in our workforce, not participating, and we need them. We need them. So that's one piece of the pie. Then you've heard us talk about untapped talent pools. So during COVID, what I loved, the people who are living with disabilities, they entered the workforce at a high rate because you had all these remote opportunities. And we want to see, and that's an untapped talent pool. We also know people who were formerly incarcerated, untapped talent pool. Older workers who left their jobs during COVID have all this information and these leadership skills, want to get back in the workplace because they're taking care of their parents now and they've still got young kids at home. They need the money and can't get back in the workplace. Our military affiliated families and veterans. So there are groups of people who are being overlooked. And within those groups of untapped talent, you've got every color, sex, native origin, geography, everything. And so we're telling people, look there, look here, they're waving their hands and you've not tapped them in. So we want you there. So that's our workforce participation guide. The biggest thing we talk about the future of work, as you know, is AI. Mm-hmm. Acknowledging it is still new. There are still places that haven't adopted it. There are still people who haven't even tried ChatGPT one time. But there are other places that are moving forward and they have lots of jobs, and that there will be jobs that are displaced by AI. So how do we get those people retrained, upskilled, and reskilled into areas where the human factor is critical to getting the job done as opposed to that? And then modernizing workplace policy. We did this for the 2 years of the 118th Congress when we talked about FMLA. Not recall, we had Bill Clinton in our annual conference.
What is FMLA for people that don't know that?
Family Medical and Leave Act, right? Okay. And so Bill Clinton signed it during his tenure as president. So that tells you how old this thing is, about 37 years old now. And we had him come to our SHRM conference the year that the legislation turned 35, because we said, look, he can tell you, he's the architect, like he signed this thing. What was his expectation that it would look like 35 years later? And I can tell you, it doesn't look like how we thought it would look because it hasn't modernized with the workplace. And we saw that during COVID. The Immigration Act of 1990 has been updated. And that's why we're dealing with some of the workplace immigration issues we have here. So we think those three buckets are the things that we need to be paying attention to.
Awesome. Emily, I appreciate you're one of the hardest working people I've ever been around. What you're doing, you talked about the 300. You'll know the number, I won't. 340,000 members representing like 10 million employees, representing like 100 million families.
7 million people. Yep. Mm-hmm.
There you go. So yep. I knew I would undershoot the try. I mean, like what you're doing, the ripple on effect of the kinds of things that y'all are working on, and again. Just like on the workforce participation thing, like that's the talk about inclusion. That's like the ultimate inclusion thing. It's like, how do we bring more people into, good paying jobs where you get emotional fulfillment, financial fulfillment, societal fulfillment, right, out of doing real work. You didn't mention, I guess it's maybe under the future of work kind of stuff, but also education and what you guys are pushing for, and Johnny's testimony, right? And
So,
how, go ahead.
no, you're absolutely right. That falls there as well. We call it the E square, education to employment pipeline. As you know,
Say that again, say it slow.
E square, it's the education to employment pipeline.
Gotcha.
And so, as you know, Johnny opened his testimony and said the education to employment pipeline is leaky, broken, and busted. And it is. Yet, we still have the greatest system in the world. So we just need to do a little bit more than patch. We got to solder. We got to get this thing fixed, right? And the visual was important for us. We spent a lot of time on that because we want people to understand that there are pipelines that feed the world of work. And if we don't get things right on the K-12 side, remember, I live with a K-12 administrator. I could have told you a few years ago that our eighth graders would be woefully behind in where we need them to be right now because COVID really did a job on them.
Yes.
Even before COVID, depending on your income and access and your parents' engagement, we know that there are students who are struggling. And these are our future workers. I could have told you the amount of time they spend talking now about college as opposed to about careers. And even when he asked me about bringing people in for career day, he's very specific about wanting to expose his kids to careers that people don't see on TV. We have a colleague that is an event planner. He owns his own business. And he wanted him. He didn't want me or Johnny, right? He said, I want this person who my young men may not think about being an event planner. They may not think about that you can own your event business and you can do this. Like, so he, we need more administrators. He's going to kill me for putting him out there like that. But I think we need more administrators who are thinking that college isn't for everyone right now. You can always go back. But we used to leave high school, many people with some type of trade or skill or certificate, and they're not doing so now. And that's part of the issue. So this, again, leads to our workforce participation gap, because if you left high school, you're not going to college or a community college or college. What are you doing? Right? You're working where? I talk about McDonald's all the time because I love McDonald's. And yes, you can buy me a Happy Meal on a bad day and it's going to make me feel good. But when we talk about McDonald's, when we were kids, think about it. Our friends that worked at McDonald's worked the afternoon shift after school. Mm-hmm. Right? In the morning, who worked the shift?
Who worked the shift?
Our grandparents. Need a little extra money, right? Miss Jones, you knew she was serving the hot coffee at McDonald's. When did McDonald's become a career for those? You usually became a career for my friend that worked in the afternoon, and then they got tapped to be in the McDonald's training program, and they went to McDonald's U, and the next thing you know, they're a GM somewhere, or they've got their own franchise, right? But most of the time, that wasn't a career for someone who just comes in one day as a cashier. It was, there were certain populations that worked there. And so what are the new jobs, and how can we get people on these career paths that may not need a degree? And there are plenty of jobs out there that don't require one. So how do we get people engaged?
Yeah, well, I do think, changing that paradigm, like if you didn't go to college, somehow you haven't succeeded, is like, but I mean, like, I definitely, like, there was no other expectation, like you have to go to college or you've completely wasted your life. Yeah. And I'm very glad to see that, that's not the case anymore. Both, from like you said, people being entrepreneurial and figuring out something for themselves, but also for employers to say, do I really need to know the Canterbury Tales to be a cybersecurity analyst? Maybe not, and so there's a lot of freedom in opening up more opportunities to people. And there's still a lot of work to be done. That people are coming out of the education system with a skill or with attributes that allow them to be trained and to be onboarded quickly and to be productive, right? So that they're attractive to employers. We could probably go down policy land for a while, but I want to be mindful of your time, Emily, because I really appreciate it. Are there any kind of parting thoughts or anything that you'd like to leave listeners with?
Look, I think it's important that you use your voice. So even if it's to use your voice to tell your personal story so you can inspire just one person, that person may need to hear from you today. Even if it is to use your voice to say to your member of Congress, I'm a constituent, and this is how this change will impact me and my family and my neighbors, do so. Remember that politics is local. And so I would tell everyone who is feeling angst and unease about the current state as we are undergoing all these changes to breathe. I've been saying this to our members. Take a moment, relax, breathe, decide what gets in your box. And the things that are most important to you should get into your box. And then the other things, you will analyze them to see whether they deserve the privilege of being in your space. But don't forget that locally, your local taxes, whether you pay car tax or not, all of those things, your property taxes, that is all controlled by another set of politicians that need to hear your voice as well. And so think about where your energy could best be. And for those, and the other piece is, know that you may not hear the loudest voices in all of this space and noise, but that doesn't mean that they're not working on it. People like to judge folk now. And if you're not out here loud and saying you're against X, Y, and Z, then they're saying, if you're in your silence, you're complicit. My goodness, we should not tell people that. And there was a time and a place where we told people that. But let's be clear. You can be behind the scenes working your network to help make things better. And everybody doesn't need to know. One of my other New York things, I got to leave you with one, is real G's move in silence. And so you don't have to always tell people what you got going on. You can be leveraging your influence in other ways so that you can help others. So I say leverage your influence to either help inspire someone, to help change laws in your community and make life better and workplaces better. If you're a member of the HR community, it make workplaces better in that way too.
Well, Emily, I'm glad you're in my box, if I can say it that way. And but honestly, I'm very grateful for you, for the work that you do, for being part of my life. So thank you for that. And thank you for just sharing a few minutes of your day, choosing to share a few minutes of your day with the audience here at Career Club Live, because I know I'm going to get a lot of positive feedback on this.
I hope so. All I need is one.
We need this one. That is exactly right. Bless you, Emily. Thank you so much. Dear listener, viewer, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Career Club Live. I know